Hello, BookTube. Well, it's Friday, and that means Friday reads. Not necessarily on a Friday, but on the Friday and the weekends, a lot of booktubers will pause from the breakneck pace of their video production, sometimes one video a week. They'll pause to make a video reflecting on their reading progress. I love it. I want more of it. Sarah at the Bookish Knitter sometimes does a book reading progress video a day. I would love it if everybody did that. I am so nosy about what you are reading. And that's what Friday Reads or Weekend Reading Updates or whatever you want to call it, that's what they do. They are, here's a little progress. I view them as if we all got together on Fridays, which in a perfect world we would be able to do. Right? There are a whole bunch of bots that watch this channel and that watch any other channel that you watch. And there are a whole bunch of people that are just what Andy Sipowicz referred to as looky-loos. They're not involved in the channel. They don't want to be involved in the channel. But there are, a few dozen people that are involved and that do want to be. And that would be a wonderful gathering every Friday. I would love that. Maybe too big for our Hyde Cottage, but we could rent a room. We could find a place that has functions and tell them every Friday a whole bunch of unmitigatedly bookish people are going to descend on this room. I would be happy to foot the bill for such a thing. But this is what we would do if we did that. If we met, this is what we would do. We would catch each other up. Oh, what are you reading? What have you finished? What are you planning on reading next? That's what these videos are in their heart. And I want to do one. I want to do a version of that. I can't do an unedited version, an unabridged version of that for me because unlike the rest of you, I don't do anything but read. I don't have another job. I don't have classes or loved ones or professional responsibilities that I can't do on the fainting couch. I'm not even wearing pants. Pretty much the only thing I have to do is right here. It's right here. It's you, baby. Yes, it is. That's it. Aside from that, all I do is read. So I couldn't do a video that encompassed the whole of that, but I want to do one that hit some highlights and lowlights. I've read some stuff that I haven't read yet, so we'll go through a few of those just for our Friday reads. And we'll start with a lot of these things have showed up on this channel already. This one is by Stephen Puleo. This is his book, The Great Abolitionist, his biography of Charles Sumner, which I really ended up liking. What you doing? What you doing, baby? I really ended up liking this. There are some elements that I'm going to need to read it again. I haven't got the finished copy of this yet. I'm hoping that I do get one. Baby, what are you doing? What are you doing, baby? She's just leaning against me. She never does that. You never do this. What's the matter, baby? Huh? What's on your mind? You still upset about your harness? I made her wear a dog collar for one of our walks today. Did not go over well at all. So we won't be doing that again. No matter how rickety the other contraption is, it can't be that. Baby, do you want to come up on your perch? Go on. Go. Can you get through there? No? God, Frida, you're a whole drama on your own. There you go. Can you get through there? Can you look out on your kingdom? No, you don't want to be there. Okay. All right. We'll put this to block the sunlight. What do you want to do then, baby? You don't even know. Nobody else has to contend with this for Friday reads. There you go. All right. Okay. Let's go back to where we were. She is now burrowing to the center of the earth. Let's go back to where we were. God, what a mess. I'm not going to reshoot this. You want to see Frida anyway. We'll just blast through the others. We were at Charles Sumner. I've read every biography of Charles Sumner. I've read a huge amount of his letters and diaries and whatnot. There were elements of this book that I would like to clear up in a finished copy. This is out already, I think, so maybe I'm not going to get a finished copy. One of the elements that was persistent throughout the book that I haven't really pinned it down. I'm going to want to do that before I review this. Is that Puleo reflexively says that Charles Sumner was a deeply flawed man with great opinions, with great social stances, a champion of equal rights, a champion of freedom. I'm not sure that I'm getting what the deeply flawed man part is. I'm not sure that I'm getting that. Is that just a reflex that you realize that you have to put in a book in the 21st century if you're praising a white man? I don't know if I'm not getting that. And from the reading that I have done about Charles Sumner, I would not call him deeply flawed. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I'll have to see. I'll have to figure it out. What that element runs all throughout the book, and I didn't understand it, but the book itself, oh boy, I liked it a lot. Then we have something by Casey Morales. I think this was recommended to me by one of those ebook deal sites. I signed up for a bunch of those things. I get recommendations, and I love it. I love it. Not just because I ignore any of them that have prices. 99 cents, $1.99, $2.99, doesn't matter. If it's any money at all, I ignore it, no matter how appealing it looks. But there are a lot of free things every day. You can add hundreds of books a month to your Kindle by just the free books alone. And I love it not only for that. I love, of course, accumulating lots and lots of books to answer any kind of reading whim. But also, this is keeping me much more up to date with what's going on in the indie world. It's a booming world. It's a world that I love. It's a world that I really want to join. But, where is the time? I'm constantly having my attention pulled at by the mainstream world. So it's great to get these things and read them. And this one I have not read yet. This is book 1 of Crowns and Quills. This is called An Archer's Awakening, with an AI cover there. And from what I can gather, this is epic fantasy, only its main characters are gay. So we'll see. I'm all for the common sense, non-crazy version of inclusion and representation and whatnot, but it's an epic fantasy. It's got to work as an epic fantasy. If it doesn't work as an epic fantasy, then I don't care what its characters do between the sheets. I don't care at all. So we'll see. I guess what I'm saying is the world building is going to have to work. And if you are an author and you are intent on writing a gay friendly epic fantasy, well, if your emphasis is on the representation and you do a crappy job at the world building, then that's not going to be pleasing. And I don't believe that's going to be not pleasing just to me. I think that's going to be displeasing to just about anybody. And then this next one, this is by David Rohl. It's come up a few times on this channel. I reread it. I reread his book, Ascent to Power, which is his new account of the death of FDR and the Harry Truman's grappling with power, with suddenly becoming president. I won't say completely unexpectedly becoming president. It was pretty obvious that FDR was not going to live long. His health was... At the end, his health was his poor health was extremely visible. You can see it even in carefully managed photos that were released to the public. And I bridled at this book the first time I read it because there's a certain biographical mythology attendant on Harry Truman that the straight shooting, pinstriped haberdasher, the normal guy that I don't like and I don't believe, and that isn't justifiable, I don't think, especially in light of a lot of the decisions that Harry Truman made. And I realized when I was reading this, I got the finished copy and I was reading this, and I realized when I was rereading it that I was letting that get in the way. This is actually really enjoyable and also fairly insightful in a lot of ways. I don't have to like Harry Truman. And I think the first time I read this, I read that big floppy Unbound Galley. I think I went into it with such a chip on my shoulder that I was thinking, yeah, you're going to make me like Harry Truman. David Rohl doesn't want to make me do that. Isn't insisting that I do that. And I got a lot more out of it again. I can recommend this book now after a reread, and I'm looking forward to reviewing it. Then this next one is by Kevin Gannon and D. Lee Gilbertson, Dr. Gilbertson. And I had to buy this because of one of you. Because on a Steve stream, I mentioned serial killers. I brought up serial killers on a couple of Steve streams. And one of you mentioned something called the Smiley Face Killers. And I briefly thought, one of you said you should check this out. And I briefly thought, okay, so this is a serial killer that I haven't heard of, and maybe that's a gimmick. He left a little smiley face buttons on his victims or whatnot. But no, it turns out it's much more than that. It's a very, very rabbit-hole-y subject. I have been deeply down the rabbit hole on the smiley face killers since then. I think I've watched everything there is to watch on YouTube. And also I've done some reading. And there is one piece of reading that is absolutely central to smiley face killers. Finally, I had to just get a copy and read it. It's this, Case Studies in Drowning Forensics. Because the smiley face killers are all about drowning forensics. Whether they are accurate or not, they're all about bodies found in water. The two authors and one other guy want to draw your attention to the fact that the victims in most smiley face killer, in what they would consider to be most victims of the smiley face killers, although they are found in water, were not drowned. That's their contention. And rather than write a sensationalistic book, they wrote a book like this. Let's talk about what we know about what happens to human bodies when they are submerged in water for long or short periods of time. So what happens to them? What happens to the skin? What happens to the fingerprints? What happens to the stomach contents? What happens to the eyes? What happens to the blood alcohol level? I had no idea before I read this book that your blood alcohol level can go up as a result of being submerged in water for long periods of time. The authors also want to draw a lot of distinction between what happens to the body in flowing water versus stationary, what happens to the body in fresh water versus salt water. I confess, in a macabre kind of way, I found this thing fascinating. I found the book fascinating, and the book seemed a lot more grounded to me than Kevin Gannon's own thoughts on the smiley face killers. I guess because of the framework. I mean, this goes a little off the handle in a couple of places, but it seemed a lot more grounded. I'm glad that I read it. It's unlike everything else that I have read and watched about the smiley face killers. This thing is going to inform my reading on a lot of other subjects. There's a lot of science in this, so I had to do it. The smiley face killers, first of all, unlike with any other serial killer, you have to wonder whether or not it's even true. You have to ask the question whether or not it's even true. Whether or not the whole story is even true. Whether or not there's anything to it at all. Because there is, on the surface anyway, a completely plausible and completely comprehensive other explanation, which is college-age guys getting drunk and drowning. That does happen. That happens a lot. The person who sent me down this rabbit hole, you'll be happy to know I am still well and truly ensconced in that rabbit hole. It is distracting me from actual serial killers. And that book is centered to the whole thing. For me, for a bookish person, it's centered to the whole thing. Then we'll move on to another thing. This is another thing that was prompted by a viewer. This was a reread, and it's not just a reread, it's a reread from the Little Book Room. This isn't just elsewhere. This is among my most treasured books. This is a book of poetry by Mary Oliver, Dog Songs. A book of poems about dogs. They aren't in any sense of the word poems. They look like them. She types them that way. But they aren't anything but journal entries. Meditations in a journal about dogs. They aren't anything other than that. But they are lovely. It bothers me that she I don't know, stack them or hit the carriage return early on them or whatever to make them sort of look like what old-timey poems look like when they aren't poems in any way. But the sentiments are the thing that I pay attention to. The sentiments are the reason that they're in the Little Book Room. And I was due for a reread of this little thing anyway. If you're a dog person, you're probably going to want to read it. Then this next one was another reapings from one of those the ebook deal sites. They don't just deal in, fiction. They often deal in, we saw it on this channel with The Baron of Beacon Hill, a biography of John Hancock that was just free one day. It was the ebook, just free. You just add it to your Kindle. And that same thing happened again with, this was Garibaldi and the Making of Italy by J.M. Trevelyan, which I was amazed to find it just in that day's offerings. It was completely free. I hadn't read this thing in forever, if then. Large chunks of this book were not ringing bells with me. Maybe I never did read it. I'm so familiar with Trevelyan's style that maybe, and his style is so similar from book to book that maybe I just thought that I read it because I've read so much else by this author. I loved it. Absolutely loved it. I love the experience of it. I was so weird at seeing it in one of those aggregator sites that I went on on Amazon to check to see if it was actually true. And naturally, my eye was drawn to all the reviews, and a lot of the reviews were complaining about how poor a job the ebook formatting was on this. I don't know what they're talking about. I didn't see that. The ebook that I got works perfectly, including all the footnotes that have little bright blue coloring, so you can zap right on them. I loved it. Baby, what are you doing? Then this next one also came from one of those ebook deal sites. I haven't read it yet. I have a feeling I know what I'm in for. This is by Emma Thorne, and it's called His 5-Night Stand. The description that I read of this thing is that there's a young woman who she's been horribly burned in her relationship, and she's feeling all adrift and like she can't trust men anymore. And apparently the main male character is really nice and really likable, and decides that he will do her the favor of rogering her back into a good psychological place. He doesn't intend to be her boyfriend. He doesn't intend to show her any affection. He just wants to sort of thump her back into right thinking. I don't know that could possibly be the plot of this thing, because that seems really, really revisionist, even for today, even for the 21st century. But it was free. It was free, so I'm going to give it a try. Then this next one, this is a vintage science fiction collection. Also an author that, like a couple of other authors these days, an author that I'm getting kind of sniff around the perimeters curious about to read a lot. The author is Gordon Dixon, who wrote the Dorsai books, some of which I really like. And this is In the Bone. This is an old collection of his science fiction. That I had this as a mass market paperback once upon a time, this exact cover. And there were some things in here that I really liked. They've been anthologized everywhere. Gordon Dixon's short stuff is really good, so it's in older science fiction anthologies that you see it everywhere. But I haven't actually taken this book and read it from start to finish in a long time. So I'm going to do that. And a lot of these stories I will know already. Some of them I'll know really well, but it's on the agenda. Then we have another book that was served up by one of those ebook deal sites. This is by Jane Bettany. It's a Violet Brewster mystery, and it's called Murder at the Book Festival. I don't know anything about this, but all of the murder mysteries that I have read as a result of those ebook deal sites have all been terrific. Maybe a little bit on the simple side, but all really good. I mean, I admit, I think a lot of you mystery readers would probably admit this right along with me, that when you're in love with a genre, not books in a genre, but just the genre, you can often just give your critical faculties the day off. Why don't you go, to the penny arcade, and I'll call you when I need you? Because there's sometimes when you just want a nice, soothing, comfortable, feet up visit with a genre. And in those circumstances, it only needs to be able to walk across a room to give you what you want out of it. And I'm not meaning to insult this book, because I haven't read this book. Some of the mysteries that I've read that were free ebooks have been a little bit on the pro forma side. A little bit obviously lacking artistry. It's okay. There's artistry and there's artistry. And also with murder mysteries, some of the artistry, in fact, a large amount of it, is behind the scenes, so to speak. It's how well did you orchestrate the plot that you're dealing with. Of course, on top of that, I would like the artistry of, good writing, good dialogue, convincing three-dimensional characters. I don't know if I'll get that here. We will see. We will see. I'm positively disposed. And then this next one is a novel. I read it last night. So it definitely counts for Friday Reads. I really enjoyed it, but it, like the Great Abolitionist, it confused me in a couple of ways. I'm going to need to read it again. This is by Maxine Loskotov, and this is Old King. And that is grainy video footage of a forest on the cover, apropos, because this is a novel about Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber. And I liked it. I really, really liked it. It reminded me immediately when I was like 40 pages in when I was thinking, yes, I have read you before. I read one other novel by this writer. He has the same stylistic tics. Some of them are very strong things. Some of them are almost a voice. And I was reading along and I was thinking, all right, well, this is really, really good. These characters, the angles that you're taking on them, especially his grasp of narrative tempo. Boy, that is almost a lost item in living authors. Especially that. I was rolling right along with the book. I got all the way to the end. I didn't see one aspect of the ending coming. And then I closed the book. It was like 3 a.m. and the bean was sound asleep. And I sat back and I thought, well, okay, but I was waiting for all sorts of gimmicks. I was waiting for you to be smuggling in an agenda or subverting expectations or doing something like that. I don't think he does that at all in this book. I don't think I realized only once I was done with it that I was on edge expecting that the whole time, but I don't think he ever does it. I think he just sits down and tells you a novel, tells you a really good story, which I'm sorry to sound so baffled, but nobody does that anymore. Nobody does that, especially not so-called literary fiction. This has all the bells and whistles of so-called literary fiction, but without any of the, the precious look at me, ma, I'm writing type affectations. I don't know. Maybe they're there and I missed them. maybe they're there and I missed them. I'm going to give this another try. Definitely. I'm going to read this again. So this counts as a Friday Reads for all the criteria. It's just read, it's am reading, and it's going to read. It counts for all of them. This next one, I'm going to read this, and we'll see what I make of it. I'm already yelling at it, but it might not deserve that. This is about Vladimir Putin, Donald Trump, and the corruption of American democracy, and the title is While We Slept. And we did not sleep. We did not sleep. Some of us were screaming from the rooftops about this particular subject when 2015 was barely begun. Some of us were screaming from the rooftops. And when the Mueller report was published, and long before the Mueller report was published, we already knew from firsthand reporting that was not contradicted or that was documented. But once the Mueller report was published, those of us who were not dumb enough to be taken in by Bill Barr and actually read the Mueller report, it's crawling with Russian interference in and command of the Trump campaign. It's crawling with federal violations of campaign independence, campaign integrity. You're not 20 pages into the Mueller report before you are barking your shin on felonies left, right, and center. And yet, because of Bill Barr, the arch traitor Bill Barr, because he went on camera right away and lied to the American people, that lie has cemented a place in the American popular culture. Oh, Russia, Russia, Russia. Oh, the Mueller report showed no Russian collusion. It shows the exact opposite. It shows Russian collusion up to your eyeballs. So we did not sleep. Plenty of people did not sleep. But maybe the author is just picking a provocative title. If so, it clearly worked. So we will see. We'll see what the actual book has to say. And then we can finish up with comic books. I mentioned the other day in a comic book video that Marvel's Epic Collection line, they do a big, generous, full-color paperback Epic Collection reprint line where they go into their vast back catalog and reprint blocks of issues. And I mentioned that a cursory look at the Epic collections coming out for 2024 did not reveal anything that I was overly excited to see. But I'm still going to read them. With a few exceptions, I'm still going to read them and see what they are. And this is one of them. This is Fatal Attractions, an Epic collection. I think most of the issues here are by Scott Lobdell, who's not a favorite of mine. Very much an overwriter, not as much of an overwriter as Chris Claremont, but who could be. But still, somebody who really wants you to see how clever he is, as opposed to telling really thrilling X-Men stories. Although I remember that some of the stories in the issues collected here are pretty thrilling. And also, Epic collections give you a lot. They don't just give you the bare minimum. And there are some things, X-Men spin-off titles reprinted in here that I have not read. So there'll be new material here. And I believe that at least a few, maybe 6 issues in here are drawn by John Romita Jr. at the height of his powers. That's going to be worth it. I'm not the hugest X-Men fan in the world, but I imagine that there will be more than enough in this volume to justify the $50 price tag. I imagine that will be true. So I will definitely get it. I'm sure that it won't be a frequent reread, but I'm sure that I'll read it enough to warrant it. So there you go. That is a up and down, a roller coaster ride of a Friday reads here for April 19th. And of course, I'm curious to know if you don't have a BookTube channel, or if you have a BookTube channel, you don't make Friday reads or weekend read reports of your own, or you're just a viewer of BookTube. I'd love to know what your equivalent of a Friday reads. What are you working on? Did you just finish? Has this week, even this year, had any real blazing standout things? This has been a good reading year for you so far. A lot of you have pointed out in emails that it's now well past time for me to do the quarter life crisis book tag, and that you enjoy it when I do that. And it is a nice stock taking kind of video, so I really should do that. But I've overloaded you with videos for today. But what is, in the meantime, what is your quarter life crisis? Just a rough thumbnail estimate. Has 2024 been a good reading year so far? You don't want to judge such a thing like that in February, but a quarter of the way through the year, that's time enough to think, to look at it. And also, what are you reading right now? What are you reading? Are you planning any huge things, any huge Michael K. Vaughan style reading projects? I'd love to hear about all of it. But anyway, I'm going to wrap this up for now. I'll see you next week for another Friday Reads. Thank you, BookTube.